Ugh, God, I gotta burp. No, I don't have to. I'm not sure if I'll cut that or not. Anyways, hi everybody. This is the third of the Back to Basics generalist workouts. So, just for some reference, the template I'm using, I'm basically having 4 alternating workouts that I'm going through. I also ate a bunch of salt and a bunch of carbs, so I look like I ate a whole beach ball. But regardless of that, here I am just doing some renegade rows, pairing them up with some extended range of motion push-ups. I just enjoy how these feel. I think it's a pretty easy sequence to do. You get core training, you get pull training, and you get push training all at once. So it's really hard to beat. I also like there's a little bit of an anti-rotation element as well when you're switching from one side to the other. They are surprisingly hard. They're quite humbling. The first time you do them, there's definitely a high level of coordination that is a little unexpected, but is a welcome challenge. My push-up form probably looks a little unconventional. I'm just trying to maximize the stretch on the chest. I have a hard time engaging my pecs, and so I have to go to pretty extreme measures to work with that. And then here I'm doing some loaded carries. Just doing like a little back and forth. I guess this time I'm just doing like a goblet or a front rack. Listening back on these edits, I've never sounded more like tired and out of it on any of my voice recordings before, but I think it's kind of funny, so I'm probably going to keep it in that way. And also, I just don't want to go to the effort of re recording when I think the ideas are good in between the absurdity. Just wrapping up the last of these renegade rows. Okay, now I'm going to full front rack carries. I'm not sure why I didn't do that the first time around. Maybe I was just using that as a bit of a warm up. I like front rack carries a lot, actually. There's quite a bit of core challenge as well. You don't actually get too much shoulder fatigue, at least I don't. Maybe I'm just at the point where they're conditioned. But it is a pretty good core challenge. It's helpful for if your front rack position isn't particularly strong. It's a way to focus on that without having to worry about, doing the rest of the exercises. Here I think I'm doing what it looks like 2 pulls on each side. So that's a bit of an advanced version. It's much easier to vary back and forth. And then now I'm doing Gironda pull-ups. It's an arch back pull-up, but you really are arching your back as much as possible and just pulling maximally with your lats. So I love training the back. I love bodybuilding style training for the back, and I don't particularly like weighted pull-ups, and so these are the best possible option if you don't like that. And now I'm just going into some kettlebell clean and jerks. Again, I think I mentioned in an earlier one, I wasn't really doing. Oh, what did my dog? I forgot that my dog was in this footage. So he doesn't really understand exercise as a concept, and he's very needy because he's a golden retriever. But sometimes he likes to come up here and just stares at me because he has no idea what's going on. Anyways, back to the workout. The clean and jerks are feeling good. These are definitely one of my favorite kettlebell exercises overall. I initially found them very challenging. At least the jerk part was really an unnatural feeling. It was just hard to get that leg drive, and you get a little bit of a catch where you kind of absorb the shock with your legs. Here I'm doing some straight arm or mostly straight arm pullovers. It doesn't really matter if your elbows are completely straight. It's just got to be close to it. You can see by the position of where my hips are at that this is basically a flat back on the ground. So, tucking your pelvis a little bit. And the idea of this is to focus more on the chest and taking some of the lats out of it. You still get quite a bit of lat stretch at the bottom. When it comes to most compound exercises, you're never going to be able to fully isolate the movements. You can just modify the leverages to emphasize one muscle group over the others. I really enjoy all forms of pullovers. I think that they're one of the exercises I'm always shocked that I never see done in the gym. And when I do see, it's usually people doing it with egregiously bad form and very light weights, which I think is really ridiculous because these are exercises you can load up super heavily. Years ago, I ran the squats and milks program back when I was worried about building a lot of muscle mass. This was, when I was much lighter. And the majority of my back muscle mass just came from doing barbell pullovers on a decline bench with easy curl. I was getting up to, I think, 125, maybe 150 pounds. I think maybe a little more. I'm not sure. But anyways, a fairly substantial amount of weight. and just cranking out for 20 to 25 reps. And in my opinion, it's one of the most perfect back movements ever made because there isn't actually any arm flexion being done, so it's just purely back. When you do them right, it feels like this weird combination of a row and a pull up, but you can modulate and load very heavily. You get a huge stretch. You also get a ton of engagement in other areas of the upper body. So here I'm just doing some arm bars. These are really just a shoulder stability exercise. You could say that they're rear delt, but you're just mostly using it as a stabilizer. I don't really see them as a very good, muscle building or strength building exercise. It's just a way to build more stability in the shoulder girdle and to train some rotational mobility in your thoracic spine. They are also a helpful accessory movement for certain things like the Turkish get up, the windmill, the bent press to a certain degree, just because it's getting sort of the similar feeling of that rotation, and you can just isolate that. And I find that from what I've seen, that's one of the hardest parts for people to master is just rotating their spine under load in that specific position. It's very alien feeling to what people are used to with barbells and very conventional style training. Besides the ballistic training and the posterior chain training that you get with kettlebells, there's also just a great amount of rotational and lateral chain training, which I think is really helpful as well. Here I'm doing some alternating rear delt flies on the gymnastics rings. I like the alternating ones because your other arm can support a little bit, so you can actually get into a harder leverage than you would be able to otherwise, which seems a little counterintuitive, but it's like you're doing a little bit of a mini row, really just enough to hold your body in place. And here I am doing L-sits to dips. This is a training for a transitional movement, eventually trying to get from a tuck L-sit into a tuck shoulder stand, and then hopefully full L-sit into a full shoulder stand. I'm pretty new to more skill training focused rings work, but I really enjoy it, and I actually find that a lot of the strength and muscle mass gains come with the skill training and with that rings flow training. So it's a little bit closer to, I guess you could say, conventional gymnastics, except for me doing a cradle here, which I didn't think about the camera angle for, obviously, because you can just see almost nothing of note, just my feet hanging in the air looking ridiculous. This is just me doing power wheel ham curls. I like to use a bit of a resistance band just to get a bit more glute engagement. Otherwise, I don't feel any. The nice thing about those booty bands is if you're somebody who has glute amnesia or whatever they call it, where you just have a hard time feeling and engaging your glutes and hip muscles, you can just put booty bands on, or hip bands, I guess is the probably more appropriate term, and it's going to allow you to engage that musculature pretty effortlessly. So a lot of times I'll use light ones just if I don't want to mess up the motion, or I can use heavier ones on an exercise that's already glute focused to make it more effective. Here I am doing primal flow, still shaking off the rust. It felt a little bit better. I think I was just remembering some of the muscle memory. I was also listening to a podcast, I think, so I started laughing. So just ignore that. I'm a big fan of listening to music and podcasts. I think some people worry about it being distracting, but when you're doing these long haul type workouts, you really need anything that's going to get you through it. Not all of the exercise that I do is inherently rewarding or interesting, but I know that it's useful, and so I'm willing to do whatever it takes to keep myself engaged, keep my mind entertained. Everyone's a little different when it comes to that. I actually find I can focus more. I sort of use this as a bit of a background noise. And sometimes when I'm not focused too much on what my body's doing, I can just let the autopilot muscular memory stuff take over. I think that's maybe just a trait of being an athlete my entire life. I'm not sure if that's really applicable to the average population. But for me, most movements feel automatic, and the less I think about it, the better I do at them. One of the other notable benefits is that listening to music or a podcast really helps me push through fatigue. So at the end of workouts, when I'm really gassed and I want to just get through it no matter what, I don't want to be focusing on the sensation of fatigue, because all that's going to do is distract me from actually finishing the work that needs to be done. Whereas if I have something else that's occupying my mind, I find that the discomfort is less apparent because there's other things going on that are keeping me occupied and entertained. I don't know what the hell those were. I guess scorpions. Some of this is really sloppy. I think the scorpions came back the least, And then I'm sort of doing that primal flow type duck walking. I'm just really fatigued at this point, you can tell. I'm pretty out of breath, pretty out of gas by this point in the workout.